Christian Watson set to miss the postseason for the Green Bay Packers, probably some of next regular season with an ACL injury. How big a loss is it, and how do the Packers recover? Plus, our pal Lily Zhao joins us on today's show.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast to iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers, the number one Packers podcast on the internet, and the show for fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Start the playoffs, New customers place a $5 bet. You can start with $200 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Christian Watson reportedly has a torn ACL. Matt LaFleur confirmed he will not be with the team the rest of the season. Did not confirm the injury per se, but we understand this is the situation. And there is going to be a push from some people that, this is not that big a deal, and he's always hurt anyway, and so it's fine, no big deal. That's just not the reality. And I wrote about this a little bit today at The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. The Fox telecast had the stat that the Packers average 8.9 yards per attempt when Christian Watson's on the field. It's 7 when Christian Watson is off the field. Let me just give you a little bit of perspective on that. Lamar Jackson led the NFL this year in yards per attempt, 8.8. So the Packers offense with Lamar Jackson was better, with Christian Watson was better than the near MVP. The guy who nearly set the passer rating record took it from Aaron Rodgers. Will Levis averaged 6.9 yards per attempt this season. Joe Flacco averaged 7.1 yards per attempt this season. CJ Stroud, 22nd in yards per attempt at 7. So without Christian Watson, this offense this year at least was a below average group. Theo Ash had this stat, our pal who's been on the show before, that with Christian Watson on the field, the Packers averaged 1.67 yards per route run and an explosive play rate that would have led the league. That 1.67 yards per route run would also lead the league for a receiver room. Without Watson, they had an explosive play rate that would have been 19th and a yard per route run figure that would have been 13th. A fine number, fine group, but not, the best. And the biggest problem is man coverage. Christian Watson was 6th in yards per route run among qualifying receivers. The Packers did not have another player in the top 50. Dontavian Wicks, who is the most intuitive guy, ranked 102 out of 105 in yards per route run. Now, part of that is because, against man coverage, part of that is because he's had a ridiculous drop rate, and so it's hard to create when you're not catching the ball. You're getting open. Led the NFL in separation rate this year. Let me say that again. Dontavian Wicks led the NFL in separation rate. The rate at which he ran a route in which he created separation. Over 76% of his routes ended with him creating separation for a throw. Led the league. Jaden Reed, according to Next Gen Stats, 4th, I've thrown in a lot of numbers at you, I understand, 4th in average separation. So in terms of how many yards of separation on average does he have? Now, Jaden Reed has primarily been the zone coverage beater for this team. The Packers are playing a zone coverage team on Sunday, but it's a zone that ends up being a lot like man coverage in a lot of circumstances. Or it ends up being zone coverage on the backside. Those kinds of things. You're going to need both. Jayden Reed had a huge game the last time these two teams played. Had a 70-yard touchdown. It's the big overs. It's those crossing routes. It's finding opportunities against single and two high coverages. But they're going to need Dontavian Wicks because he is the guy one-on-one against a Quinion Mitchell, against a Darius Slay, who you can trust to get separation. Romeo Doubs, who knows? Is he going to be healthy? Like, you might have the flu and be down for... I was talking to a guy today, and I was at a store, and I was talking to the guy. I asked him for Kleenex, and he said, "Oh, I just had this bug," and he said he didn't feel right for 2 months after having the flu. How is Romeo Doubs going to be feeling on Sunday afternoon? I don't know. You're going to need Dontavian Wicks. Now, let me flip this a little bit. Go back to last year. Now, this offense, we saw, I think the numbers were like they averaged a touchdown more last year, something crazy, when in the regular season, at least, when Christian Watson was out there versus when he wasn't. But in the second half of the year, when Jordan Love went full Toyotathon, there was no Christian Watson. He was hurt. And in the playoffs, Christian Watson was out there, but he was not producing, was not doing anything. It was Dontavian Wicks. It was Romeo Doubs. It was Jayden Reed. It was Tucker Kraft. It was Aaron Jones. Well, they have all those guys and frankly, better versions of all of those guys. What they need is for this offense to find its rhythm, to lock in on really what it wants to be. And maybe, and this is part of, I think, the Matt LaFleur charm, is when they have faced adversity from a personnel standpoint, it seems to lock something in, maybe lock something on, with Matt LaFleur. He seems to find a way. And it's usually him using more schematic operations to get guys open, to find opportunities for a Malik Heath, for a Bo Melton. He had specials galore against Dallas. They had not trick plays per se, but like specials. The Bo Melton touchdown that I talk about seemingly every time I bring up Bo Melton. In a playoff game, they called that the fake bubble go. Those things are in the playbook. They're out there. Now, I still don't know why the play action game is not a bigger part of what this Packers offense wants to be and what they want to do. And maybe they're saving some of this stuff for the postseason. That seems weird that you wouldn't want to run some of it during the year. But they have the answers here. Both things can be true. It is a big deal to lose Christian Watson. But they have the answers. We saw it last year. We haven't seen quite the highs of that team, at least not against a good team this year. But we know they're capable of doing it. How many times do I have to point out that against this Eagles team, they slept-walked, B- performance, all the boneheaded penalties and drops and weird Matt LaFleur decisions, and Jordan Love had a couple weird throws. 400 yards of offense against a defense that ended up being the best defense in the league. I don't know Cooper DeJean, and there's some reasons for that, but also like Sean Ryan in his first game as the preferred starter, and even then he's rotating with Jordan Morgan, who got worked by Jalen Carter a couple times. And now Tucker Kraft is your preferred starter. Like Josh Jacobs, his first game. How do they use him? They didn't even have any of the cool single wing stuff. They have such a more varied approach that they can take here. But they can't be paralyzed by choice, which I think sometimes this team can be. There's so many things they can do that it's like they've lost the things that they really are best at. They've got to find that, but it's there. They can. And if they can capture it, we know they can beat anybody. All right, Lily Zhao joins us next on Locked On Packers. It's playoff time, and if you're like me, you want to make the most of these final weeks of football season. That's where Prize Picks comes in. If you love football and want a chance to win real money while watching the games, Prize Picks is the place for you. It's the best way to turn your sports opinions into cash with daily fantasy player projections. With Prize Picks, you simply pick more or less on player stat projections like passing yards or rushing touchdowns for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your money. You can make picks in less than 60 seconds, and whether you're looking for a flex play or to boost your payout, you want to win cash quickly, Prize Picks has got you covered. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings, it's clear people are loving the platform. Here's a special offer for Locked On Packers listeners. Download the app and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play that first $5 lineup. You don't even need to win, just play it. Locked On to get $50 after you play that first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. It was supposed to be a new year and a new team for the Green Bay Packers. Well, that didn't go according to plan, but new year, same us. Lily Zhao from Fox 6 in Milwaukee joins us after a disappointing end to the 2024 regular season, although it was, of course, in 2025. Lily, how you doing?
Peter, I am doing well in terms of the fact that it's a new year. It's the same us, but hopefully it's a good year for us. But you're right, it was kind of the same old Packers, and that was disappointing to watch and to digest. But it is what it is. I'm still keeping the positive train rolling, so I'm doing well. How you doing?
I'm good. It is funny because for as much as it was a funeral on social media on Sunday after the game. You look at all the underlying numbers and they still say that Green Bay is really, really good this year. And they won 11 games. And if I told you before the year they were going to win 11 games, you probably would not believe that they were going to be the 7th seed. I'm sure that that's true. So that's the interesting part of all of this. We have to start, though, with the news of the day because Christian Watson feared. Matt LaFleur was unable to confirm or just unwilling to confirm that it was an ACL, as reported by both Ian Rappaport and Adam Schefter. What is your just reaction to that news?
Just heartbroken for Christian Watson. I know he fought so hard to get back and play for this team, and we've obviously seen the impact that his absence has on this offense, right? And just how valuable he is to stretch the field and even be a decoy and just bring the speed and another valuable pass catcher for Jordan Love. But outside of just the playing aspect of it, you just feel bad because, again, this is a kid who's worked his tail off. He's dealt with multiple injuries. He's worked hard to get back. And, he really wanted to play. And that really was talked about of how do you balance kind of keeping him out and keeping him fresh for the postseason when even during the week he talked about just the value of getting more snaps before the playoffs. And it sounded like he wanted to go in and he wanted to play. And, of course, without Romeo Doubs, him being ill, it was probably more of like, oh, sure, we can kind of be more cautious with Christian, but let's get him on the field. And the fact that that's how it went, right? He was running a route. It was non-contact. That just is so heartbreaking. So I feel awful, and it just stinks that this might impact the start of next season for him as well.
Yeah, I would say there's a pretty good chance that he is not going to look like the guy we're used to seeing at the start of next year, and that will be a contract year for him. And so you hope he's able to get his body in a good position moving forward here. The impact, I mean, I've seen so many stats about the impact of this on the offense, almost a 2 full yard per attempt difference when he's out there versus when he's not. Explosive plays, they're like fine, middling, creating explosive plays when he's not out there. And when he's out there, they are basically what would be the best in the league at creating explosive plays. So where do you think the first place or they'll turn, whether it's a player or an idea, like how do you think they can try and offset that?
It's going to be hard. I don't think you can, quote unquote, replace a guy like Christian Watson, but you can try. You can try to do your best to kind of do what they wanted to do had Christian been healthy. So again, we've seen deep shots to Jaden Reed. He's been able to capitalize on that. I thought Malik Heath made a phenomenal catch, that 41-yarder when he wanted to get it. And Dontavian Wicks, I think Dontavian's going to be a big part of this offense. I think he stepped up very nicely in Christian's absence late in the game as well. So I think, again, you have guys that can stretch the field. I think Jaden Reed might be that one guy, the speedy guy down the field that you can do that with. But again, it's hard to replace what Christian Watson meant to this offense. But maybe you can do it with a couple deep balls to Jaden, or you get Malik and Dontavian involved as well. And hopefully Romeo Dobbs will be healthy and feeling good himself. So I think in terms of stretching the field, you go Jaden or one of those other guys.
Yeah, I think as the book may be out a little bit on this team and playing them in man coverage, you're going to need Dontavian Wicks because he is, other than Christian Watson, their man coverage separator. And so, they're going to have to find a way to reorient this offense. I don't know how they're going to do it exactly. In some ways that works to their benefit because they can come out and show some things to Philly that maybe they haven't seen. We have to talk about the way that Bears game ended. And I know no one wants to hear about it. No one wants to talk about it. But before we get to it, understanding that the game ultimately didn't matter because the Commanders pulled it out. I actually did my live show thinking that the Cowboys had won that game because I was just like, well, there's 30 seconds left or whatever there was, like 40 seconds left. It's over. And then they win again, miraculously at the end. I mean, how many times are they going to pull these games out? It's really incredible. But it felt like to me, Lily, that this was a team that did not know how it wanted to go into the game. Did not decide we want to go full bore or we're just going to kind of do nothing. They seemed caught in the middle to me. How did it seem to you?
Yes. That's the answer, yes. But you know what's interesting though, before I answer that question, I remember what you said during our last Is How You Doing? You said, what if you play the starters and they don't look good? And that really sat with me because I'm like, that's kind of what happened.
What happened?
That's exactly what happened. But you're right. I think it was just they weren't really sure how to navigate it. And again, I think Matt LaFleur was asked post game whether it was not complacency. That's not the right word, but they just were more like, this game doesn't really matter. We're in the postseason, and they kind of played that way. And I think you saw that from the get go. I mean, that was a bad first quarter. That was a bad first quarter.
Yeah. When
you get Jordan Love and Christian Watson injured in the second quarter. And then again, you dig yourself into a hole. You can't make the stop on defense. You do just enough to give yourself a little bit of an edge in the fourth quarter. And that's not sustainable football. And it just was the way that they came out was just a little discouraging because you figure regular season finale, it was a sour taste in your mouth the way you lost to the Vikings. You're at home, the last game at Lambeau this season. Why don't you come out and punch the Bears in the mouth? And they did the exact opposite of that. So that just was discouraging to watch all around.
I think it speaks to the point that I have been harping on for weeks now, ever since we knew that their shot at the division is essentially over, that they just did not care about the seeding. They really just did not care. And it is hard. It's easy for us to say, well, there's all these things they can accomplish. I think it's human nature for them to go, like, is this really, like, even if it's not front of mind, it's in the back of their minds. I think maybe this is unfair, and I'm leading the witness here, and that's okay. That's my show. Did any of you watch Sunday going, this couldn't have been the Sam Darnold that showed up 2 weeks ago?
Yes. And this is what I got from that game. No matter how depleted the Lions defense was, they played with effort, they played with hustle, and they played phenomenal. And that's what I wanted to see from the Packers. But that's what you saw from Detroit, and that's why they're the number one seed for the first time ever.
Let me say what your network TV brain did not allow you to say. They fight their asses off. That's what Detroit does.
Yeah,
that's what they do, and they are annoying to play, and it is stark to watch. Now, I will say, I mean, how many wide open guys did Sam Darnold just miss or turn down? He had Jordan Addison twice in the low red zone, wide open for a touchdown, and just didn't throw it. And it's just sort of like, I thought he played so awesome. Like, he played the best game of his career 2 weeks ago and played like Sam Darnold on Sunday night. And it's just sort of like, well, if you flip those performances, who knows how all of this looks different. I mean, it wasn't going to change in all likelihood the outcome of the NFC North in any way, but like, it was interesting to me that was how that all played out. Okay, let's do what Matt LaFleur said the team is doing. Let's flush it. All right, it's gone. It's over. Let us never speak of that Bears game, please God, ever again. One thing that I am thinking about with this week is week one. How much do you think we can take away from that game in terms of the matchups, in terms of the players that played well and didn't play well?
I think there's something to take from it. Again, obviously the team has evolved after 18 weeks, both teams, and we've seen the same players still play their best. So Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley. I mean, those two guys have been phenomenal.
Right, yeah.
They've carried the offense, and they're still doing that now. And they did that in week one. But what I take away from that game in Brazil, outside of the turf conditions, was that the Packers really beat themselves. I mean, they really, really beat themselves. Again, we can talk about a touchdown that was taken off the board because of a flag. They were sloppy in that game. They were penalized a bunch of times.
They were so sloppy. Oh my gosh.
So sloppy. You take all that away. You play a clean game. I think that was a winnable game for Green Bay. And so I think they can take a lot from that game, because how they played in week one was kind of how they played the last 2 weeks going into the postseason. So you take all of that into account, but then you also realize Saquon Barkley hurt us in week one. He was a big part of why they won. And he could do it again to us in the wild card round. So how do we try to contain him? It won't be easy. Don't think they will, but you have to do enough to kind of slow him down. So I think there's a lot you can take away from week one.
Yeah. All right, back with more Lily Zhao on Locked On Packers. I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. One of my favorite memories, just before my wife and I moved, we went to Game 5, Brewers Diamondbacks. Nyjer Morgan hits the game winner, the walk-off. I'll never forget the sound the crowd made. I'll never forget it. Well, Game Time makes it easier for you to get tickets for your favorite events with new feature, Game Time Picks. The feature filters out the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. This is the thing that I loathe about ticket buying, is sifting through all of the nonsense. I don't want to deal with it. And Game Time makes it easy. Plus, the app's all-in pricing allows you to see the cost total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. Yeah, I think people also misremember, not you necessarily, but people misremember how that game went and what Saquon Barkley actually did, because there was the one touchdown run the one touchdown catch that was just like really, really nice. And I will always believe that if the field is not an ice rink, that Xavier McKinney actually gets to that ball. But if you look down, Saquon Barkley only averaged 4.5 yards a carry. And I say only because he's Saquon Barkley. Like, he averaged almost 6 yards a carry on the season. And so they actually did a pretty good job containing him. They did a pretty good job containing Jalen Hurts. It was in some high leverage moments. They couldn't quite come up with the stops. And I just feel like Edgerrin Cooper is playing. Let's just start there.
Yeah.
Matt LaFleur said he's optimistic that Quay Walker is going to be able to go this week. That would be huge. I am wondering, though, about that week one game. Lily, do you have milk in your fridge?
I do.
Do you think Jaden Reed is on the carton? Because where has he been?
Yeah.
Like, the one play that he made is on a bad throw from Malik Willis on a deep ball that he made a great adjustment to. And it's like, okay, you can make those catches, but a ball right in your face mask is a drop. I don't know what happened, because he was phenomenal in the week one game. And we haven't seen, and really for the first 8 weeks, right? And since Jordan Love has played better, ironically, Jaden Reed has been nowhere to be found.
And now with the absence of Christian Watson, maybe this is a game where we can see a lot more Jaden Reed, right? And maybe this is a game we can see a lot more Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave and get the two tight end set going as well. So maybe this is what we do end up seeing, because you're right. I mean, Jaden Reed certainly ran wild over this Eagles defense, which has been really good this year. Yeah. And so we'll see how they adjust to him. But I think the fact that I know he's probably just hungry to have a big game again. So maybe this is the week that happens. But you're right. You have to get him involved. He's one of the playmakers on your offense, and he did so well against the Eagles the first time. So why not put him as one of the main guys to scheme up and get open against Philly? Because let's be honest, they need everybody to play their best game of the season, obviously because if you lose, you're out, but because we haven't really seen that in a while. It's really just been kind of a couple duds to go into the postseason. Why not get your first marquee win on Sunday.
I think this is very much still a get the ball to your psychos game, because you see that first game, before we knew fully what Josh Jacobs was capable of, before we knew fully what Tucker Kraft was going to become, they played well in that game and they had some big plays. And so I think this is, again, with the absence of Christian Watson, Jaden Reed, Tucker Kraft, Josh Jacobs, if you get those guys going, I think that's where the key matchups here can be. You and I have talked a lot on this show, Lily, about the Jordan Love turnovers and Matt LaFleur's insistence. He does not care. I would say over the last 6-8 weeks, that is not borne out by the play calling. And it seems like Jordan even himself is thinking and maybe it is a Jordan Love thing, that he's thinking a lot about those turnovers. How do we square those two things? Are we getting fed false information, or is this just like, hey, for most of these games, they were able to run over everybody with Josh Jacobs. So like, who cares if Jordan Love is only attempting 18, 20 passes, or is there something under the surface here? What do you think?
I think it's more of the fact of, regardless of opponent, I think for him, it was just, I'm hurting the team. Like I've talked about, I want to be a risk and reward quarterback. And obviously that's good when stuff works out, but the risk is I'm turning the ball over every single game, and that's putting my team in adverse negative situations. And I know you wanted to really be cautious of that moving forward. And we can talk about the flip there, especially last season, the back end of the season where he went on a phenomenal run, didn't throw any picks, and just the momentum that brought them going into the postseason. But now you're right. It is kind of a little bit different because you don't see Jordan going really, you're not seeing him hunt the big play the way that he was during the stretch where he was throwing interceptions. But maybe that's what made this Packers offense electric, and that's maybe what you need if you want to get an explosive play, but then the risk is it could be picked off. I mean, we saw him throw that deep ball, I think it was to Tucker in double or triple coverage.
Yeah.
It potentially could have been picked off, but those are the kind of plays I think we were seeing a lot more of during that stretch earlier in the season. So maybe there is a point to say, regardless of opponent, I kind of want to play it a little bit safe, and maybe he has that same mindset in the playoffs because, again, one turnover to Philly, and that could be the decider in the game.
Also, that throw hit Tucker Kraft in both hands. And yeah. I thought the announcers overplayed how close that was. That could have been intercepted. And it's like, yeah, it could have been, except Tucker Kraft had both hands on it. And the defender was not near, like they were in the area, but they did not make a play on the ball like Tucker Kraft did. So it was like, Kraft kind of made the same play 2 quarters later, right? In tight coverage, leaping and grabbing it. So that's just one of those things. They're going to have to find that balance. It does feel to me, even without Christian Watson, that this offense is always sort of right on the edge of figuring it out, of hitting one play that sort of the dam breaks, and all of a sudden they're doing all the stuff that we're used to seeing them do. It feels like this is very much a team that rides that momentum. It's like if they can just have an opening drive score, that just means everything to them. I think that is going to be the key this week, Lily. That first 15 or first 20, whatever it is that Matt LaFleur is going to script, they got to spend a little extra time on that script this week and have all the stuff they had against Dallas when it was every play off the play and it was every tendency breaker. Like let's try some stuff. It's kind of like they need to get back to just playing loose. I don't know.
I 100% agree. I think you just feel it too. Just even watching the game, if they score on the opening drive, it's going to be a good day. When they can't get going on the opening drive, it's like it gets in their head and they don't know what to do.
The youngest team in the league.
Right. And they stumble out of the gates. And you're right. I think if they have a good start on their opening drive and just get some points out of it, that will do a lot for their psyche and their momentum. And then just to help themselves say, okay, hostile environment, we scored on the opening drive, let's go do this thing. Versus we went 3 and out, here we go. But I also want to point out Brandon McManus is on the roster. So if they need a kicker, we'll be fine. Different than week 1. So
that is an important key. I'm so glad you brought it up. It did seem like we were going into the postseason with him making a 45-yard game, or 55-yard, excuse me. Let's not shortchange the guy. A 55-yard, and Lily, not just a 55-yard game winner, a 55-yard game winner in feels like 7 degrees. Yeah. It's going to be cold in Philly on Sunday. It's probably not going to be feels like 7, but that feels like it matters that the Packers have a kicker that they feel comfortable doing that. Now, do I wish that it made Matt LaFleur a little bit more aggressive in plus territory? Yes, but the fact that they have that much confidence in him, like that has to matter, right? Like it has to matter.
It has to matter, and it gives your offense more wiggle room. You're right. And that's what matters. And I think that kick probably would have gone for 60 had it been that length. So
it looked like it looked like he had the leg certainly for more. I mean, the ball guy behind the uprights just kind of casually caught it. So like it cleared by like 5-6 yards vertically. I'm not great on like the math of those things, but it seemed like he had more than enough leg. Hopefully this is something that the Packers can have for the next couple of years. I know he's getting up there in age already, but we'll see what happens here. We'll be back next week to talk about all of it. Thank you so much. Happy New Year, and we will talk to you soon, Lily.
Happy New Year. Thanks, Peter.
All right. Thanks to Lily for joining the show. Always awesome to talk with her. We're back tomorrow with more. We got our crossover Thursday coming. Locked On Eagles return. Gino Camilleri, Louis DiBiase. I don't know if it's going to be both of them or one of them or whomst it will be, but we will have them and we will have a really good time. Follow me on the social medias. Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on the social medias. Go check us out over on TikTok. We're on Instagram. With the videos, you guys are loving the post-game reels. We got previews that we put out on social media, so check out all that good stuff. And we're over on YouTube. We'll be live on YouTube. So FanDuel had, I think, just placeholders. I mentioned this on the live show that they had it as a Sunday 1 o'clock East game. It's Sunday 4:30 Eastern, 3:30 Lambeau time. We'll be live after the game on YouTube, so you can stay locked on Packers.